So we're going to cook a little lamb dish here today at Daylesford. So we've got a neck of lamb. So neck of lamb is quite an unusual cut. It's really good because it's worked up lots and lots of flavour. It's tender enough just to roast and slice. It's great value. You'll find it relatively cheaply at your butchers. And this is brilliant Daylesford organic lamb. It's a really wonderful, wonderful product and a real great thing to cook. Super, so we're going to start cooking this lamb. So we've got a little bit of grapeseed oil here. We don't need to flood the pan with oil, just a nice little bit in the bottom. I've got that number 12 on the induction. And then in a separate pan at the same time, although you could do this separately if you wanted to be a little bit more in control of things. And then we're going to take some pine nuts. And these pine nuts are just going to be toasted gently. So we've only got that on number 8 on our induction stove, whereas we've got the lamb right up at kind of 12, which is going to get nice and hot, nice and quick. So wild garlic pesto, the ingredients we've got these toasted pine nuts that we're going to add, and then we're going to start assembling things in here. Now usually for a pesto you would be using basil or flat leaf parsley or coriander or any kind of herbs that you wanted to use, most traditionally basil. And then you would be using some wet garlic or some garlic cloves, whereas of course we don't need to add garlic cloves here because we have some wild garlic. So a few kind of nice strong leaves. Don't worry too much about these flowers as well, they can be added as well. And these just need to be torn up and added into the jug. We're then going to take a nice little pinch of Parmesan, as much or as little as you like. Little touch of pepper. We don't need to use too much because the olive oil, extra virgin olive oil, can be quite peppery. We don't need too much salt because we've got the Parmesan and it can be quite salty, so we'll just take a little pinch. And then we're just looking for these pine nuts to just toast and become ever so kind of golden, quite uniformly. Now at the same time, our pan here, I'll move this so that you can see, for the lamb, is starting to get nice and hot. So we'll take some salt on both sides of the lamb and a nice twist of pepper. Don't be afraid of seasoning. Sometimes people think that chefs use an awful lot of salt, but actually, you know, we're just seasoning for the whole cut of meat. So even though it looks a lot on the outside, it's not necessarily so much when it comes to the middle. So let's use a pair of tongs to lift this up. It's really important that that pan sizzles so that we're getting a nice kind of golden brown coloration. We can leave that in the pan like that for about 30 seconds to a minute. In the meantime, our pine nuts are just starting to go nice and golden brown. Now at this stage, they take a long time to come up to temperature initially, but then once they start to come up to the temperature that they start to turn golden brown, then be careful because it happens relatively quickly. So just keeping an eye on what's happening here. And then when you started to get some nice golden brown coloration, you can pop these pine nuts into the dish with the wild garlic. So let's add some extra virgin olive oil. Now you can add, but you can't take away, so we'll just add maybe 5 or 6 tablespoons to begin with. And then I'm just going to set that to the side. I'm just going to watch this lamb here for a second. Now this is incredibly important. This golden coloration here, this can be considered just as kind of pure flavour. Okay, so this is the sugars and the amino acids in the lamb caramelizing and essentially producing flavour. So without this coloration, you don't get any flavour. So we're going to keep that moving around. And then if you like, you could add a little bit of garlic or a little bit of thyme into this pan. And then we're just looking to seal in all of those edges. Nice roasted colour. Okay, at which stage I'm going to turn that off. I'm going to pop this pan into this oven. 190 degrees for between 8 and 10 minutes. It's going to be nice and pink. Let's turn our attention to this wild garlic pesto. So I'm just going to turn around here. I'm going to use a hand blender. If you see these big pestle and mortars that we've got. They are wonderful if you've got them at home, but they're very heavy and they take a very long time to make something in. So therefore, we're just going to use this hand blender. It's going to make things a little bit easier for us. And then just as we go, we'll add a little extra virgin olive oil. So once we've got all of that blended, well, firstly, we're going to have a little taste. I think that tastes great for salt and pepper. And then look at that colour. Sometimes I think that actually wild garlic gives a better coloured pesto often than basil does. But of course it has a relatively short season, so you can only get hold of it a certain time. And then let's have a look at this lamb and what we're actually looking for. So it's only been in here for a few minutes. I'm just going to turn it over, and then you can see more of that lovely coloration that I was speaking about. Chefs are always poking things. What are they looking for? You're looking for what we call a kind of firm bounce. So at the moment this still feels a little bit flabby, which is a good sign that it's underdone. So I'm going to pop it back into the oven. Okay, and that stays in the oven for 6 minutes from now. So let's look at the next part of the dish. We're just going to heat some of this mashed potato. So this was the mashed potato that was prepared in the steam oven. We find that steaming mash just kind of helps get a really nice consistency and a really nice texture. What you tend to find is potatoes don't like water very much, so therefore they don't really like being boiled, or if they are boiled then they want to be dried out quite significantly before mashing. So if you are using these in the steamer oven, then you're going to peel your potatoes, rinse them in some cold water, and then pop them on a steamer tray and pop them in the oven. They're probably going to take somewhere in the region of half an hour to 40 minutes. So let's cut these tomatoes. Now, instead of cutting tomatoes from, imagine, the North Pole to the South Pole, I think it's always nicer to cut tomatoes across the equator, and then that way you see all of the seeds. So you see the difference here between cutting across the equator and from North Pole to South Pole, so you don't see any of this core. Another quite nice tip is if you line them all up, sit them all on their bottoms, then you can even do this in a line if you like, and it saves you cutting the tomatoes individually. You just pop your palm down and then just run through them all at once. Okay, and then that just makes it a little bit quicker, a little bit easier. We want to keep a little eye on the mash here that is getting hot without burning underneath. And then let's again have a little look at this lamb. Okay, so this lamb is now cooked to my liking, so I've got what we call a firm bounce, okay? So it's nice and springy and bouncy, doesn't feel too flabby. Okay, so let's take this lamb out and let's rest it, okay? So I want my lamb just to be nice and pink, okay? So I'm leaving that. And resting that lamb is so important. You can buy the best lamb in the world. If you don't cook it properly and rest it properly, then you're not getting the best out of it, okay? So it's really essential. This is still keeping on cooking. So if I was to cut that open right now, then it would be quite rare inside, whereas by resting it, just allowing that temperature to come down slowly, then it's really kind of getting the most out of it. And then what we have here is loads and loads of flavour. So in the bottom of this pan from the lamb, there's lots and lots of flavour that I need to capture. So I can do that by adding in my cherry tomatoes. Okay, and what's going to happen is the juice is going to come out of these tomatoes, and then it's going to start to mix a little bit with the lamb juices. Let's add some salt and some pepper. Let's add these caper berries. If you can't get caper berries, just use some normal capers, either in salt or in a little bit of vinegar. And you see all that flavour coming together. Let's add a little bit of butter into there as well. And then let's take some of this charred. So the good thing about charred is we've already got a lot of colour in here as well already. But then just by adding this charred, you can see this beautiful rainbow charred. It's got lovely different colours of leaves. And then just by tossing that through, we're building up so much lovely colour. Let's have a little taste. Delicious. A little touch more salt. You get the saltiness from the capers, makes it quite complex, like little bursts of flavour. Okay, so we've got our lamb resting, we've got our tomatoes in the pan, just wilting down with the charred ever so slightly. We've got the garlic pesto, and we're ready to plate up. So let's just make a nice shape with the mashed potato. Just keep on moving it around the pan, just using the spatula and the pan to give you a nice shape. And then let's just make a little dimple in there for our tomatoes. And then make sure that if you're doing this for more than one person, that everybody gets a nice selection of tomatoes, that they look pretty, that they've got enough caper berries, that they've got enough charred. And then you see that this is supposed to just be an explosion of colour. And then light garnishes like this go tremendously with lamb. So don't worry too much about things looking absolutely perfectly in place. I think that looks great. And then let's lift this lamb onto here. So remember, this is the neck, so it has lots and lots of flavour. Should be really nice and pink. If you would like it cooked a little bit more, remember I had it in the oven for about 8 minutes. You could have it in the oven for 10 or 12. And then let's just lift this lamb up. You can see it's perfectly cooked. Little touch of salt on top. And then let's finish it with this beautiful wild garlic pesto. Now, don't sauce over things. You've just worked very hard to get that nice and pink. The last thing you want to do is cover it up with this pesto. So as much or as little as you like. And then we have a finished dish, which is a roasted neck of lamb with mashed potato, cherry tomatoes, caper berries charred, and some wild garlic pesto.